It happened on a Tuesday night at exactly 11:42 p.m. I remember the time because I checked my phone while waiting for the subway, trying to decide if I should call a ride instead. The platform was nearly empty, washed in cold fluorescent light that made everyone look pale and tired. There were only 3 other people nearby, a woman in a long gray coat standing close to the edge, a man in a dark hoodie pacing near the stairwell, and an older man sitting stiffly on a bench against the tiled wall. Everything felt ordinary. Quiet. Routine. And then, in a single sudden motion, the man in the hoodie stepped behind the woman and shoved her forward onto the tracks. She didn't scream. She didn't even turn around. 1 second she was there, and the next she was gone. I heard what sounded like a body hitting gravel and steel just as the train roared into the station. My heart leapt into my throat. I shouted, waving my arms, expecting chaos, expecting someone else to react. But no one did. The older man on the bench remained perfectly still. The conductor leaned out of the train window with mild confusion, not urgency. When the train came to a stop, I rushed to the edge of the platform and looked down. The tracks were empty. No body. No blood. No torn clothing. Just cold steel rails gleaming under white light that I turned toward the man in the hoodie, expecting him to run. Instead, he stood calmly with his hands in his pockets, staring at me with something close to curiosity. The woman in gray was nowhere to be seen. The doors of the train opened, passengers stepping out casually as though nothing had happened. I felt like I was the only person awake in a room full of sleepwalkers. I reported it immediately. 2 transit officers arrived and listened patiently as I described what I had seen. They reviewed the platform's security footage while I stood outside the small office, trembling. When they returned, their expressions were cautious. Concerned, but not in the way I expected. The footage, they told me, showed no woman in a gray coat. No man in a hoodie. Just me standing alone near the edge of the platform, suddenly lunging forward as if trying to grab something that wasn't there. I insisted they check again. They did. The result didn't change. I found the older man still seated on the bench. I asked him directly if he had seen the shove. He slowly turned his pale face toward me. His eyes were strangely colorless, almost faded. He told me there had been no one else on the platform. His voice was flat and measured, as though he had rehearsed the sentence before speaking it. Then he stood and walked toward the stairs with deliberate slowness. I watched him go, feeling the first cracks of doubt forming in my mind. The next morning, I tried to convince myself I had imagined it. Stress. Exhaustion. A trick of perspective. But my phone showed an emergency call placed at 11:44 p.m. that lasted nearly 6 minutes. I had no memory of what I said during that call. I searched the news for reports of delays or accidents at that station. There were none. It was as if the entire incident had been erased from reality. 3 days later, I saw the gray coat again. I was crossing the street when I noticed her standing across from me, motionless. The same coat. The same posture. Her face was blank, her eyes wide and unblinking. Traffic passed between us, briefly blocking my view. When the vehicles cleared, she was gone. No one around me seemed to notice. That night, the man in the hoodie appeared outside my apartment building. He leaned casually against a street lamp, hands in pockets, watching me. He didn't approach. He didn't threaten. He just observed. The streetlight flickered once, and he vanished. I returned to the subway station and demanded to see the footage again. A different attendant pulled up the recording. There I was, alone. Standing near the platform edge, staring at empty space. At one point, I reached forward suddenly, panic on my face, but my hands grasped nothing. The woman never appeared in the frame. The hoodie never entered view. I felt my stomach drop as I watched myself react to something invisible. Desperate, I followed the older man one evening when I saw him exiting the station. He walked several blocks to a narrow brick apartment building. I waited until another tenant opened the door and slipped inside. I found his unit number and knocked. The door creaked open. The apartment was nearly empty, no couch, no television, no decorations. Just a single wooden chair positioned in the center of the living room, facing the door. And on the wall behind it hung a long gray coat. After that, I began noticing patterns. The subway platform never had more than 4 people waiting at night. Never fewer. Always 4. The older man often sat on the bench. The gray coat sometimes appeared in reflections but not directly in front of me. The man in the hoodie appeared at a distance, watching. The entire scene felt staged, like actors hitting their marks in a rehearsal. Late one night, I found a missing persons post online from 3 years earlier. A woman had disappeared after taking the subway home. The attached image showed her wearing a long gray coat. The account that posted it no longer existed. 1 week after the first incident, I returned to the platform at exactly 11:42 p.m. I stood in the same place and waited. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead. The older man sat on the bench. The hoodie stood near the stairs. The woman in gray stood at the edge. The sequence repeated exactly as before. I tried to shout a warning, but my voice felt muffled. The hoodie stepped forward and shoved her. She vanished. The train stopped. The tracks were empty. This time, I didn't look at the rails. I looked at the older man. He was watching me, not the train. Slowly, he raised one finger to his lips, signaling silence. That was when I understood. The event wasn't random. It was repeated. And I was the only one reacting. When I checked my phone afterward, it was 3:07 a.m. Nearly 3 hours had passed. I had no memory of where I had been. My call log showed another emergency call. I listened to the recording. My own voice sounded distant and hollow. "It's happening again," I kept saying. 2 nights later, the older man stood inside my apartment without knocking. He didn't look surprised to see me. He told me calmly that what I witnessed wasn't a crime. It was a correction. Some events, he said, occur outside ordinary perception. Necessary adjustments. Most people never notice. Those who do, forget that he offered me a choice. Let it reset, and I would forget everything. Or continue seeing what others could not. I refused. I told him it was wrong, no matter what he called it. For the first time, his expression shifted slightly. He told me that if I continued to interfere, I would take her place. Tonight, I am standing on the platform again. The clock reads 11:42 p.m. The fluorescent lights hum above me. The older man sits on the bench. The hoodie stands near the stairs. I glance down at myself that I am wearing a long gray coat. The train headlights glow in the darkness of the tunnel. I hear footsteps behind me. And no one else seems to notice.